Okay. Hopefully you guys, the video is okay now. All right. I hope you all are doing well this evening. It's Makeda Valletta, also known as the Renaissance Amazon, Queen Lioness. I am live right now on my IG page, and I will save it and repost it to my YouTube. For those of you who don't know me, I am a dancer and a trainer and a bunch of things, but let me get to the point. This evening, I want to talk about this viral video. This video that's gone viral with this little girl twerking in front of her dad, okay? So I've been listening to some conversations about it on Clubhouse today, and there's a lot of thoughts and things that I feel like people are also missing and kind of misconstruing. For those of you who may not be familiar, I am a dancer, but I'm a serious student of dances of the African diaspora, particularly in the Americas. So that's the Caribbean, South America, North America, Central America, and the Congo, okay? I have a special interest in the Congo. In the Congo, dances from the Congo are very hip-centered, okay? Very much centered in the hips, lots of intense movement. All the popular black dances in the Americas come from the Congo. So Jamaican dancehall is straight Congolese. Afro-Cuban rumba, straight Congolese. Even they play conga drums. What does that sound like? Congo, right? Then you have a lot of the folkloric dances in Haiti, which a lot of my Haitian friends are not very knowledgeable about. But Haiti has a big body of folkloric dance. It's amazing. Congo has a big influence there. Merengue from the Dominican Republic, straight from the Congo. Afro-Puerto Rican bomba has the Congo roots. Salsa, Congo roots. Samba from Brazil. Samba de Bahia, straight Congolese, okay? And then in New Orleans, you have Congo Square, okay? So if you look at traditional Congolese dance, even if you look at soukous, which is like the more contemporary Congolese dance, it's a lot of footwork, but it's very centered in the hips, a lot of intense hip movements, right? And so, I just want to say that I think there's a big difference between what adults do and what kids do. Because in this conversation, the conversations I've been hearing, people mix the two, right? I think there's always been what's appropriate for kids and what's appropriate for adults, okay? And even as a kid, knowing how to stay in your place with that. Okay, there are people who say they don't curse in front of their kids. But my parents cursed in front of me. I knew better than to curse in front of my parents or to curse in front of my teachers or to curse in front of any adults. So even though my parents may have cursed and they may have cursed at me, I knew not to curse back or curse at anybody. I knew that. I knew a child's place. If I saw my parents drinking or somebody in my family drinking strawberry daiquiris, I knew that was for adults, okay? And as a kid, I think all of us sang songs that had to do with sex or something, and you didn't even know what you were singing, and there was an adult who told you don't sing that, right? And you weren't even aware, all right? So that's always been the case, and it's like, okay, stay in a child's place. There's also what's appropriate for a kid, okay? And when it comes to dance, there are some cultural things, too, that need to be taken into context. Now, first, let me just say that I absolutely no way think that video was appropriate. So let me just get that out the way. I don't know if you guys know about this, but it went viral today. I didn't see the video, but I saw photos from the video and people's comments, okay? And apparently it was a little girl who was twerking on her dad. And her dad was sitting there with a red cup in his hand in a chair like he's at the strip club, and the daughter was twerking in between his legs. Apparently, is what it said. I think that's really gross and weird. Okay, and there's a few things that I want to touch on, because when I talk about the cultural context, okay, so I'm Black American, all right, and I grew up in Harlem, Washington Heights. Washington Heights is a heavily Dominican neighborhood, all right. And little Dominican girls, a lot of times they be wearing little tiny heels and little tube tops, and they're like 5 years old, right? To Black Americans, we thought, whoa, like that's why they're dressing their daughter like a grown woman, like trying to be sexy. And it seemed like they were just so obsessed with being sexy, right? That wasn't my experience as a Black American in our culture, but No culture is a monolith. You know what I'm saying? You have people like that in every culture, but I'm just saying. So then I remember when I was in Jamaica, years ago, seeing a little girl, some little girls outside whining, but they were in a circle and they were with other women in the family. They were with like their mothers and other women. I didn't see any men around. It was like grown women and little girls. Little girls were whining. And I remember thinking to myself, that's different, because in my family, like I would never whine or do any type of dance like that in front of my parents or with my mother. But I recognize that that's a cultural difference. Okay. Also, when I was in college, there was a Trinidadian girl. I went to college in Delaware, so there was a lot of Black Americans from Philly, from DC, from Baltimore. But there was a girl from Trinidad. And so me being from New York, I was around Caribbean people. Black Americans, you know, we don't typically, you know, that to me, these are generalizations because nothing's 100% true. Okay, nothing's 100% true because I'm not saying every Caribbean does this either, okay? But culturally, we don't typically whine and stuff like that around our moms and do that. But I remember this Trini girl, she was, you know, doing the most whining. She's in college, but she was doing it around her mom. All the Black American students couldn't understand that, and they were judging her, and they were like calling her a hoe and this and that, even though the girl was a virgin. But she danced like that. She was Trini, and I remember thinking, you have to put these things in the cultural context, right? Because sometimes what's like totally weird or inappropriate to you is not like that in somebody else's culture. But to me, I also am looking at it through a critical lens. Like if I see little girls doing that, because I've also seen it in New Orleans, right, with a bounce culture. I've seen little girls doing bounce dance outside, but they might be around women, mothers, older women, okay? I think that's different than when you have a bunch of men, male gaze eyes, right? And so, but again, I didn't grow up like that, you know what I'm saying? But I'm just saying, I'm just trying to put it into cultural context, because some people are like that. But as somebody who, when I was raised, I was very much, you know, I remember my grandmother always taught to me about appropriate touch, okay? She taught to me about, you know, my genitals, you know, about how it's not appropriate for grown people to touch you here. And she would be, or anyone, right? And she would be telling me, you know, if anybody touches you, you know, tell me, I don't care what they say to you. Like I would watch, even sometimes you watch those movies, I don't know, like Lifetime movies, or I don't know, some type of movies where some kid might be getting molested and the adult is trying to scare them to not speak about it. My grandmother always used to tell me, I don't care who tries to threaten you, who tries to scare you, say something to me. I don't care who it is or what they say. And my grandmother was always dead ass serious, right? And, you know, it was like my family, that was always like reiterated to me about what's appropriate, you know, those boundaries. And so luckily I was never molested or anything like that, because I felt like I had, you know, parents around me and people around me who taught me what's appropriate, how to recognize it, told them to talk to them, and they were cautious of who I was around. But as an adult, especially in the work that I do, you know, I do a lot of work around sexuality and sexual education. Some of you may or may not be aware of the fact that I've been teaching a workshop to women since 2007 using yoni eggs or nani eggs. So it's a class teaching women to connect to their vaginal muscles and get more control and all of that, right? And with teaching that class, I became aware of so many traumatized women. How many women had sexual trauma? How many women have been sexually abused as a kid? I mean, it's epidemic proportions. It almost seems like if you weren't molested as a kid, you're a minority, okay? And in my life, even when I wasn't even teaching those classes, even just other times that I might have been doing regular training, I've had women tell me things, very disturbing stories, okay? Very disturbing stories that I didn't know what to do with, okay? Women telling me that their father was having sex with them or their stepfather was having sex with them, them telling me that their mother might have encouraged it, or I've heard people tell me that, you know, their father was having sex with them, and the mother said, oh, your father is the first one that's supposed to get you, okay? Now, I heard that a lot. I've heard that a lot from Caribbean people, right? And I'm not saying that it just occurs amongst Caribbean people. I'm just saying I've heard that a lot. I mean, the people that I've heard it from the most, I felt like were Caribbean. That's just an observation, okay? But it was interesting because earlier today, I'm listening to this conversation on Clubhouse, And they kept blaming it on American culture, right? Like, oh, this ghetto American culture and da-da-da-da. And I'm listening to people speak, and I didn't even know the people who were saying this were Caribbean, but it's interesting because they're speaking about this father and they're speaking about ratchet American culture. Then come to find out this guy, he's in Florida, and my family's from Florida, but I know most people now who live in Florida aren't from Florida. They're usually Caribbean, and he actually was Haitian. So we found out that the man was Haitian, and the guy who in the conversation kept talking about, ratchet American culture, he was Haitian. And I love Haitian people. Let me just say that. But I'm just saying that in my observation, okay, of being a Black American who growing up in New York around Caribbean people, they were the ones to me that did a lot more whining and stuff like that around their family, okay? Not Black Americans, okay? But I'm not saying that you don't have some ratchet Black Americans, especially young ones who are ratchet doing that, okay? But I'm just saying that I don't think that was so typical and normal. But again, Black Americans are a monolith. My whole point is there's a difference between adults doing that. You guys who follow me, I'm all about twerking and gyrating, and there's healing properties in it. But there's a difference between grown people doing it and kids, number one. Number two, even when kids do movements like that, because if kids do take Afro-Cuban dance classes and Haitian and Colombian and Congolese dance classes. And some of those classes do involve movement of the pelvis and shaking something. But sometimes when you're doing some of those dances, it's the intent behind it. So you might be doing those movements, but you're not in your mind thinking about seducing, right? Or you're not doing it when you're going up to somebody trying to entice them, right? So in the dances, those movements, they're not just... the properties behind it is not just about selling sex or trying to entice somebody sexually, okay? There are also a lot of healing properties in the dances, and especially with moving the pelvis. That was something that was very much Afrocentric aesthetic. And, most of our blood supply runs through our hips. We store trauma in our hips, so it's important for that to be mobile. But when you're talking about, because even the hula, okay, hula dance, which is from Hawaii, from the Polynesians, in Hawaii who do hula, is something they start learning as little girls, little tiny girls, okay? And they have these schools, I forget what they call them, I used to know. But there's a name for the schools where they learn this, and they study this from the time that they're little. But they're doing it in the presence of older women. They're not learning how to move their hips, and they have a bunch of grown men staring at them. Or they're not standing in front of their father doing it. You know what I'm saying? So what I'm saying is that there's certain, movements that somebody could deem as sexual that in certain cultures, young girls did. But they did them around, in community, around elder adults, female adults in the family, right? But I think that I feel like a little girl being in between her father's legs twerking is totally inappropriate. And the thing that it makes me wonder about, okay, is actually I'm not saying that he's a molester. But like I said, the fact that I've heard so many stories as an adult, and I've heard so many sick stories, it seems like there's a lot of pedophiles out here. Because there's a lot of people, okay? And there's a lot of little boys that have been touched by a grown woman. Even though men don't seem disturbed by that, but that happens a lot, okay? I feel like just as much as the other way around, except girls are damaged by that. But the fact that I've heard so many stories from people about their father, and I don't know how you even recover from your father touching you or having sex with you, your father or your stepfather. But the fact that I've heard that so much, it only makes me look at something like that and wonder, is that what could be going on there? Because how could a father even feel comfortable with his daughter in between his legs twerking? Okay? And the thing about twerking, again, I think twerking for adults, great. Okay? But the whole idea behind twerking to me is purely, the mind state is kind of purely sexual almost, Or it's purely, there's no footwork in twerking. There's no arm work. You ain't doing nothing with your arms. You ain't doing nothing with your feet. It's just pure hips and pop it, pop it, pop it, pop it. So it's kind of an overtly sexual dance. So to do that in between your father's legs is absolutely, like, I'm a grown-ass woman, and I would not dance like that in the room with my parents, okay? In the room with them. Now, I'm not ashamed of their dancing. It's just weird to me to be doing that anywhere around my dad or my mother, my brother, any of that. And talking about cultural differences is funny because in this conversation, I heard a woman talking about the Hispanic community. And I don't know which group of Hispanics she was talking about because that's a broad, umbrella. But she was talking about how, like, brothers and sisters would be, like, dancing with each other in a very sexual way, in a way that she thought was, like, totally weird and inappropriate and something that she would never do and could never imagine herself doing with her sibling. And, so that's what I'm saying. Like, sometimes there's some cultural differences in what people think is acceptable and unacceptable. And that's a real thing. And when you travel around the world, you see that, like stuff that you might think is so rude and inappropriate in another country, that's normal. But something that you think is good manners in another country is rude and inappropriate. So it's like, so that has to be put into context. But then even with that being said, I feel like there's still some boundaries for me. And I feel like mixing up the conversation of talking about, grown people doing it and kids, like, don't start talking about Megan Thee Stallion and Cardi B. They're grown-ass women, That's different than children. And children knowing, because, like, even when I was coming up, like, dance hall was big. There's girls that would dance, whine all kinds of crazy, get on the wall to dance hall, but they're not going to do that in front of their father or on their father, So there's something about that that's disturbing. And that mother co-signed it all right? The other thing is I heard a lot of people talking about, how they don't smoke and drink in front of their kids. And I don't really necessarily see a problem with that, because a lot of people drink wine or drink beer or have a drink in front of their kids. I don't see a problem with that. I don't see a problem with the weed either because, to me, I grew up around black intellectuals, right? And they all smoke weed, okay? I've been watching my dad smoke weed since I was a little girl with all his intellectual friends who were in the front lines of the civil rights movement. All they do is read books. They were all professors, having these scholarly conversations. And when I was about 12 years old, I don't know, maybe I was 12, I don't know how old I was. But my dad had a conversation with my brother and I. And he told us, he was like, listen, I smoke reefer every day. And I don't care if you smoke, but just wait till you're 18 when your brain is fully developed. You shouldn't be doing that before your brain is fully developed. And he was dead serious. And I didn't. The first time I ever smoked any weed, it was the end of my 12th grade year. When I was in high school, I was a goody two-shoes. I was into my schoolwork. I was an athlete. And I knew other girls who were athletes too who smoked weed, but I didn't smoke weed. I wasn't doing any of that. I wasn't cutting school. I wasn't like trying to rush and have sex, okay? Even though, I found my dad's, I probably shouldn't say this in this video because I don't know if he'll ever see this, but, I did find, his porn collection as a little girl. But I still wasn't thinking about having sex, okay? I was adamant on, like, I am not losing my virginity before I'm 16. And I remember so many, people trying to pressure me. My high school boyfriend, this other dude that I had a huge crush on, this dude that I was talking to, he looked like Nas. And he lived in the Polo Grounds in Harlem. And I had a huge crush on him. And he was really trying to pressure me. And I'm like, nope, not before I'm 16, right? And I wasn't having sex like that in high school. A lot of my friends were. A lot of my friends were dating grown-ass men. I wasn't doing that neither. I wasn't trying to be grown. When I was a kid, I was a kid. When I was a teenager, I was a teenager. And when I was grown, then I'm a grown-ass woman. And there's a difference, right? And a lot of that, staying in your lane and not trying to be grown and not trying to be doing all this shit, a lot of that has to do with the parents and the conversations the parents are having with the child. And this is one of the things that's been disturbing about this whole COVID situation in the schools closing is like the first thing I thought about is all the kids who are in unsafe, abusive homes. Okay? Yeah, teenage girls were dating college guys and grown men. And that was in every city, okay? And as wrong as I think R. Kelly's wrong, right? I'm not even going to get into the whole R. Kelly thing right now. I'm not condoning what he did at all. But I'm just going to say that I think that 15 and 16-year-old girls know what they're doing. I was a 15 and 16-year-old girl one time, and I knew what I was doing. And my friends did too. And all my friends that were messing with older men, they wanted to do that. Now, like, so anyhow, I'm not even going to get so much into that. But I'm just saying that was super common. And, you know, like, if people have the right parenting, and it's not even just about having a mother and father, because I had friends who were doing that who did live with their mother and father. But their mother and father weren't having conversations with them. You know, your parents, your grandmother, your aunts, like the elders, they need to be having real conversations with you. You know, my dad used to tell me, like, when I was a young woman, you know, don't feel like you can't be sexual because you're a woman, but just understand, you know how to protect yourself. There's a lot of crazy ass men out here. He was always concerned about my safety, always, you know, wanted to make sure I knew a bunch of ways how to hurt a dude, kill a dude if I have to. You know, he used to always tell me, if a motherfucker puts his hands on you, I want him to be the one running for help and not you. You know, so he's always been focused on that. But he didn't tell me, oh, go sit in the corner, cover up and be quiet because a man might attack you. But he did tell me, you could be every day minding your business, and there's a man watching you who's mad because he's intimidated by intelligent, beautiful, independent women, and he feels threatened, and so he feels like he's going to have a chance with you, so he just attacks you. That happens to women every day, so you need to know how to protect yourself. Okay? So what I'm saying is, no matter what people see from me now, like you could see me now on social media half naked, you could see me now twerking and moving, but I'm a grown-ass woman, okay? I wasn't doing that shit when I was 15. You know what I'm saying? I wouldn't do that when I was 15, you know? And even thinking about, like, it's just, so, I mean, to me, I just don't understand, like, the fact that a father even felt comfortable. Yeah, most fathers avoid long sex talks with daughters. No, my dad was always straight up with me. My dad was more straight up with me than my mother, okay? Very straight up with me. About men, you know, knowing how to protect myself. And I remember when I was a freshman in college, I remember my dad saying to me, listen, be careful having casual sex with men, because some men, you can have sex with them and they think they own you after that. And I remember when my dad told me that, and it was sometimes it'd be kind of awkward, but when my dad told me that, I remember at that moment I was going through that. Well, there was a dude who I didn't like him like that. He was cool. We had sex. He was trying to act like we together, being mad possessive, and he was not my dude. And when my dad told me that, I didn't tell him that, but I just thought, oh, wow. So, no, my dad has always, and that's what I'm saying, like, you know, I'm not, when people project onto people, like somebody could see me and think, oh, she has daddy issues. She's trying to get attention from men. No, I don't have daddy issues at all. You know what I'm saying? I was raised by a very strong black man who was there every single day of my life. You know, I have a twin brother, so, you know, I had a brother too. And my dad, you know, was very straight up with me, right? And and I always say he's the first feminist I ever met, because in a lot of black people look at the word feminist as being something bad, but there's different kinds of feminists, okay? And not all of them agree. They have different ideologies, but just generally speaking, feminism just means that women are human, okay? That we have minds and intelligence and shit like that. And I'm not going to say we're so-called equal, because men and women aren't the same. But, I mean, women have a right to make money and think for themselves and be sexually independent if they want, or independently mentally if they want, or whatever else. You know what I'm saying? So that's that. It's that simple. So, I mean, I just think that, and I remember, it's crazy, because I remember when I was a little girl, like being really little and walking around in the street with my dad holding his hand. There's so many times that you say equal but not the same. Yeah, that's a good way to say it. There were so many times I'd be walking down the street with my dad, and I just noticed, like, all of a sudden I'm walking holding his hand, and he would just stop. And I'm looking at him like, why would we stop? And I'm looking, and I look at him, and he's looking back at some woman, right? Looking at some woman's ass or whatever. And I remember thinking to myself as a little girl, like, okay, we can't keep walking, because it was just like so abrupt, like, why, we can't keep moving. So I noticed this, right? My dad probably didn't think I noticed this because I'm little, but I noticed this. So I remember being little. This is sometime in the 80s, probably in the late 80s, when there was a lot of like booty songs coming out. It wasn't Rex and Effect, but it was like one of them songs, like the Rex and Effect, Rump Shaker, one of those type of songs that came out. Okay, it wasn't Baby Got Back, wasn't that? But it was some other song by some group that was like a one-hit wonder. and it was kind of like Rump Shaker. And I saw the video, and I thought, oh, my dad, and I didn't even know had anything sexual involved in it, right? I wasn't thinking of it as being sexual. I didn't even understand that. I just saw butt, and I'm like, oh, the girls are shaking their butt. I'm like, oh, I think my dad would like this. I remember recording the video for him, and when he came home, I'm like, Dad, I have something for you. I'm all excited, thinking I did something good. You know, when you're a kid, you have no idea. I'm thinking I did something good. I remember putting the tape on, leaving the living room, going to my bedroom. And then my mother came a couple minutes after that, and she's telling me, like, come here, let me speak to you. And she's telling me, you know, this is inappropriate, you know. And you know that, yeah, because it wasn't Rump Shaker. It was another song like that. So I think it was before that. So my mother was like trying to tell me, you know, it's inappropriate. And I was totally confused at what I did wrong. And she really had to talk to me, like, and I didn't even know that was something sexual. Just an observation, right? So this is what I'm trying to say to you. Sometimes kids might sing something or do something that isn't appropriate, right? But it's up for the adults to tell them that. When you're, and then I understood that. I never did that again, right? And then I remember one time, too, being really little and sitting in the living room with my parents and saying to my dad, I still remember this, and they remember it, too. I said to him, Dad, I don't understand why you like butts so much, because the only thing that happens is that poop comes out of it, right? I remember saying that, and my parents started cracking up laughing. And I didn't understand what the hell was so funny. I was dead serious, right? So I'm just saying, Poison Clan, possibly. I don't know. So I'm just saying that, you know, and that's the thing that's so scary about kids getting molested, is that, you know, kids, they don't know what they're doing. You know, I mean, I used to, when I was a little girl, one of my best friends, I used to hump my best friend all the time. We were the same age, 2 females, but we having orgasms all the time. I'll be humping her. But if I think about that, if I had been around some sick adult, right, that was like trying to take advantage of me, and I don't even know, I'm humping my best friend, not even knowing this is sex, this is sexual or whatever. But if I can see how a kid could be taken advantage by a sick adult that is a pervert and a pedophile, right? And so luckily that never happened to me. But the thing is, we have to observe the obvious, okay? We have to observe the obvious. And I think it's different if the little girl in this video was twerking and she was just in the room with her dad and her mother was there and she was in the room over there, and, you know, people thought that was inappropriate. That would be like kind of, maybe, maybe not. Maybe sometimes you got to put it into cultural context. But when you have a little girl in between her dad's legs twerking, that is so weird and disgusting to me. So weird and disgusting, okay? Period, point blank. And the fact of the matter is that the father or the mother didn't have a problem with it. And it, like I said, it just reminds me of the stories I've heard from people who've been molested by their dad and their mom had no problem with it and egged it on and said, this is how it's supposed to be. That happens a lot. So knowing that that's happened a lot, I don't like it when people act like someone sees a video like that and they act like, oh, this is how people act now. No, this is not now. This shit kind of stuff has been happening. I know people in their 60s, okay, a woman in her 60s whose mother was trying to pimp her out to grown men, okay, when she was a little girl. Okay, so inappropriate stuff like that has been happening. That's not something now of like, no, it's been happening. Okay, and too many people ain't paying attention, because I could never understand, like I said, how, when I'm hearing all these sick stories, how that happens so much. I'm like, how many damn parents ain't paying attention? How many parents are just horrible parents? Because if your child is telling you that their father or their stepfather is having sex with them and you don't care, or you encourage it, that's the parent that shouldn't have no damn kids. But there's a lot of people like that. And so that's what the thing I was going to say about the schools closing with COVID. I don't know if I ever finished that. Was that there's so many kids in bad homes. You know, so closing the schools is okay for the kids to have good homes. The parents that love them and care about them, take care of them and feed them. But we all know there's a lot of kids that don't have that. Because I, as an adult, have been shocked at the kind of stories I've heard. It seems like kids that grew up in a good home are the minority. Okay? The minority. And school, a lot of times, is what saves them from this crazy shit. So, yeah, I just wanted to say that. And I just wanted to say, I get tired of people blaming everything on Americans and American culture. Because today when I was listening to that conversation and they kept doing that, and they come to find out the man wasn't American. Okay? And I say, as the Black American, I've noticed the whining and booty dancing a lot more around parents and around family amongst Caribbeans. Now, there are some Caribbeans who are very stiff and totally anti that. They're very Catholic, and that exists. The exception to that is in New Orleans. I feel like in New Orleans, I've definitely seen little girls doing bounce. Okay, the same way I see in the Caribbean. But it would be a lot of times in a circle around older women. Then I've heard people, I didn't even realize this. I've heard that the dance teams, no, I'm not Caribbean, I'm American. Then I've heard the dance teams, that there are dance teams now with little girls dancing really sexy and seductive. That's what I was told. Like that movie Cuties. That's so weird to me. Like to me, when you're dancing, because like you could look at some African dances that you see little girls do, and they're, they got the shoulders and the hips and they're doing that. But it's like when they're doing these movements, you can't see me because I'm in the chair, but I'm like moving my hips. And if I'm doing this, like I am moving my hips, but I'm not thinking about like sex, right? Or like, but that's different when somebody's doing a chair dance and they're filling up and doing all of this and rubbing their body. You know what I'm saying? That's totally different. Even though on both of those dances, you might have hip movements, it's like the intent and the mindset behind it is different. I didn't start learning how to try to do sexy, seductive dances until like about 8 years ago. And I'm still a work in progress with that. But the dances I did before, like if I was doing some merengue from Dominican Republic, there's a lot of shaking and gyrating, but I'm not thinking, it's not the same mindset as when if I'm on the pole thinking, oh, I'm going to do a seductive pole dance. It's not the same thing. And the thing is, yeah, that movie Cuties was horrible. At first I thought maybe people were being extra, but I tried to watch it and it was just like way over the top, the way they put sexuality with those kids. I mean, they did so much that was like, to me, they did too much to prove a point. That I'm just like, and then to think about the fact that they had to film this, so that means they had to do this over and over again with a whole crew of men and people watching. No, it wasn't appropriate. Kids can't be kids nowadays. Yeah, I don't know if it's just nowadays. That's what I keep saying. It's not just nowadays. Like, I know people older than me where kids couldn't be kids. I know kids, Biggie, back in Biggie's era, like he didn't got no father and they have to sell drugs to help pay bills. Those kids couldn't be kids. And he was born, in the 70s or the 60s? I don't know. You know what I'm saying? So that's not just now. But it's yeah, kids can be impressionable, but like I said, it has a lot to do with the parents. The mother and the people keep saying that, but they don't understand. The mother and the father in this situation thought it was okay. Okay? The mother and the father saw nothing wrong with this little girl twerking in between her father's legs. So yeah, the kids are impressionable, but I mean, something else is going on in that situation. Because again, there's a lot of kids that wouldn't do that in front of their parents, let alone in between their father's legs. Okay? And I mean, like when people even say everything is sexualized, I don't really know if I agree with that either. I think that with religion, there's been a lot of suppression of sexuality, over-suppression of sexuality to the point where it creates perverts, okay? I really believe that perverts come out of religion, like extreme religion. Most religion is so restrictive on sexuality. And most of the people, I'm not saying all, but most of the people that I know that have some crazy molestation story, they were in a religious family. So there's a lot of that happens within religion. A lot of molestation and all this sick stuff. So like I said, it goes hand in hand with the suppression. And adults, we're sexual beings. Kids, that's a different story. And I think that mixing up, kids being sexual beings in general, but especially around adults, is very disturbing. And I don't even think that is, things being overly sexualized. I think that has to do with, it's a reflection of all the pervs and child molesters that there are in this world. Because even school teacher friends of mine will tell me that female school teachers will talk about little boys and say, oh, that's my little boyfriend. That's my little boyfriend. Grown woman. And I never looked at a little boy and thought, that's my little boyfriend. I've never looked at a little boy and said no shit like that. That's inappropriate, because if a grown man looked at a little girl and said, that's my little girlfriend, that's my little girlfriend, like, you would think, no, that's not cool. So why is it okay if a grown woman says that about a little boy? Especially because most men I know have told me that when they were little boys, some teenage girl or some grown woman was touching them. I've heard that a lot. So there's a lot of grown women out here that I don't know what they do, because there's no way in hell I ever was a teenage girl messing with a little boy. There's no way that I was a grown woman messing with a little boy or a teenage boy. Never. But I feel like there's a lot of chicks out here that are doing that, because a lot of men got these stories. So what is that about? You know what I'm saying? And sometimes we really have to observe the obvious. And I feel like, and then, you know, this is one more thing I wanted to say. Shy Moss, which is Bow Wow's daughter. I've watched Bow Wow's daughter dance with her mother. And I've many times thought that it was inappropriate, because it's like the type of dancing she's doing. Like, okay, so when I was 12, if I did, you know, TLC Creep, right? TLC had Creep. And I'm not going to sing because I don't sing. But, you know, Creep, right? But then I loved In Vogue. And when In Vogue came out with Giving Him Something He Could Feel, I don't know how old I was. I was a little girl, right? Giving him something he could feel. I loved that video. And I remember thinking to myself, I want to be like that when I grow up. I want to be a beautiful woman like that when I grow up. And I found the video so amusing that these men were just like taking off their wedding rings. And like they were just like stuck on stupid. And I always found that interesting and amusing about men. It's just funny that how simple men are, especially when it comes to looking at beautiful women. And in that video, Giving Him Something He Could Feel, they weren't even doing that much. They weren't even doing that. They're doing little sexy movements, and these men are all sweating on themselves, right? So I remember thinking to myself, I want to be like that when I grow up. Okay, key word, when I grow up. I was not in my living room trying to, you know, emulate their dances. And I wasn't thinking about going around boys or my father and giving him some, you know, like all these sexy movements, filling myself up. No. And I was a dancer. I was choreographing stuff. I never thought, oh, let me go do something like that on stage. Or let me go do something like that in front of my parents. No. I thought when I grow up, I want to be like that. Okay? So when people always talking about, oh, and I remember being a little girl and loving Madonna. Okay? I remember like being little, like elementary school. And I actually liked her work. And I didn't understand why people were so mad about her, but, you know, at her. But, you know, like, little kids be curious about sex anyway, like, in nudity. And back then, trying to see some type of nudity or something sexual, you had to do some work, right? But I feel like kids were naturally, you know, curious in that way. And so even though, like, I liked Madonna and stuff like that, I was not, like I said, thinking about going and having sex with anybody. I was not. I wasn't. I was adamant about not doing that. So I'm just saying, like, and people always want to blame adults being sexual in the adult world, okay? That kids might end up seeing because kids got ways to see things, but it wasn't meant for kids, right? You can't say that adults need to stop expressing their sexuality because it might influence kids, okay? Because the fact of the matter is, kids that got good parents that know how to have conversations, it's not just about having the parents, but parents that have real conversations and teach their kids some shit, okay? Give their kids some type of self-worth and understanding of what the hell's going on and who they are, right? Then they're not so easily influenced. We're not going to stop kids from hearing things and seeing things because we all did. That's not nothing new. But I'm saying that just because you see something like that doesn't mean that you think, like, you still have to have an understanding in your head about what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. Even as a kid, like I said, my dad cursed all the time. My Jamaican uncle, who wrote Stokely Carmichael's autobiography. Okay, he went to Howard with him. He's an extreme black intellectual. Him and my dad would be cursing each other out, having these highly intelligent conversations, smoking weed. Okay, my uncle's daughter was the assistant DA of Chicago not too long ago. Okay, and his son is a major professor of American history, and I could say more about them, but because they're so known, I'm not going to keep talking about them. But their father and my father, then when they were professors, Before we were born at UMass, they used to grow weed. Okay? So when we were kids, they would smoke weed in front of us, have these highly intelligent conversations to curse each other out. We weren't sitting around smoking weed. We weren't cursing in front of our parents or doing any of that. And we all grew up to be highly intelligent, well-educated, successful people. So I'm not somebody that says, oh, smoking weed in front of kids is bad, or drinking in front of kids is bad. Like, people drink in front of kids. Being a damn alcoholic in front of a kid, that's a different story, okay? But I feel like as a kid, I knew stay in a kid's place. Just because I see adults drinking alcohol don't mean that's for me. Like, that there's a difference. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like a lot of parents, aren't having those kind of conversations. They're not having conversations about what's appropriate, especially when it comes to touch. Protect your children. And the parents, like the ones who were in this video today, who felt like there was nothing wrong with this little girl twerking in between her father's legs, that's totally like way over the line. But there's a lot of people like that, and it just exposes that. Okay, so I hope everything that I said came full circle. I hope I made that point. And like I was saying about Shy Moss, Bow Wow's daughter, she be posting TikTok videos with her mother, and I always feel like it's inappropriate. I mean, because some of the moves that she does looks too grown. When I was a little girl, it was a big thing about not trying to look too grown. Like, I went to school with all kinds of people. The white girls, their mothers let them wear lipstick before. Black moms, they were like, no, you ain't wearing lipstick at 12. I remember the white girls wearing lipstick earlier, just trying to, and there was like, oh, you can't paint your nails red. You can't. There's certain things that's for grown-ass women. It's not for kids. So know your place, and that's really important. So I just wanted to put all that in context with the cultural considerations, and all of that. I hope that it makes sense. So I'm good. I'm done. I just feel like I had to talk about it, especially as someone being a dancer. I definitely don't think that dancing and gyrating and shaking is a bad thing, and I will keep saying that. I don't think it's over-sexualization. I don't think that women are being objectified if we're talking about grown women. I don't think little girls should be dancing like that in front of grown men, and definitely not on grown men, and definitely not their father. And then not only is that already disturbing within itself, the fact that he posted it on social media, that really goes to show you that they really didn't find a problem with it. Because sometimes people do things, like let's say the girl was in the house just twerking with her mother, and the mom thought it was fine that she's, we're just dancing together, right? That's one thing. But then you don't have to post that on the internet. That's going to take all types of pedophiles and stuff. So there's levels to shit. And so the fact that happened, and then he posted it on the internet, and then him and the mother defended it, really disturbing. So Mo, you asked me who was this? It's a video that apparently went viral earlier. Some rapper, some Haitian dude from Miami, and his little daughter was twerking in between his legs. So the father's sitting there in the chair with like a red cup in his hand, like he's in a strip club, and his daughter's in between his legs twerking. And people were outraged about it. And it became like big news over the past couple hours. And the mother and the father defended it. And everybody's comments, and when I was reading the comments, nobody thought it was okay. But the mother and the father thought it was okay. And they defended that. And I just felt like that's crossing the line for a little girl to be in between her father's legs twerking. And then you push it on social media. That I don't get. And I don't think that's cool. But I think that I have... Yeah, you said that's clearly grooming. It is. And he was laughing. He had a red cup, like a red plastic cup, like he's in a strip club, laughing and smiling, and a little girl is in between his legs twerking. Yeah, you said you were appalled. Usually fathers stop it on sight. Yeah. Yeah, fathers and mothers. You know what I'm saying? I would never think about doing something like that in front of my dad or my mother or my brother. You know what I'm saying? Like, but if I ever did, my mother and my father would stop me. Like that was never, we never danced like that in front of family. I would feel weird if I was watching somebody's child and their daughter started doing that. I'd be like, dude. Yeah, it's very. And then the father had the nerve to say, I post all this music and you guys had nothing to say. And now I post this and you guys get everything to say. It's like, yeah, dude, maybe nobody cared about your music, but this shit right here is so inappropriate. People, we don't want to see this. And what is this? You need to be investigated. Like, no. So yeah, so I'm gonna end this here. I think I made the point. If you came in late, I'm gonna save it. You could go watch from the beginning and share your 2 cents. I haven't actually watched the video. I just looked at pictures of it and saw people's comments. That was enough. But anyhow, have a good evening, guys. Bye.